In medieval Europe, some streets had higher rent than houses on solid ground. Kids grew up without yards. Beneath their floorboards lay not soil, but the black depths of a river, a place where a single spark could swallow hundreds of lives in minutes. Back then, bridges weren't just crossings. They were streets, markets, apartment blocks, and fortresses all at once. Fortunes were made here, plagues spread here, and here they displayed the severed heads of the executed. Stone connected the shores and tied together fates. Today we'll walk these bridges from dawn to disaster, see an apartment suspended above the current, breathe the city's most expensive air, and find out why bridge life could end in one morning. We begin with one question: why choose to live above an abyss? Why people risked everything to live on a bridge? In 1209, London Bridge was finally finished in stone. Massive, multi-arched with towers and gates, it was meant to simply connect the two banks, but almost immediately houses went up, because the city was running out of room. Beyond the walls, mud and danger. Inside, crushing density, taxes, and a fight for every square foot. The bridge was a ready-made platform, fortified, strategic, protected. Suddenly, the space over the river became prime real estate. The first buildings were cautious, one story, light walls, but soon, the location became too valuable to leave empty. Houses began growing upward. Each new floor jutted out further than the last, expanding over the road. Beams stretched outward, creating overhangs. Within a couple of generations, the upper floors nearly touched above people's heads, leaving only a narrow slit of sky. Even at noon, it was twilight. Rain dripped from crooked roofs onto the crowd. Wind trapped between walls multiplied every echo. Yelling vendors, clattering hooves, crying babies, barking dogs. All of it, inside a corridor just a few meters wide. Inside, a house was a vertical box. Downstairs, a shop, a counter, scales, goods. Above that, a living room. Higher still, a sleeping space under the roof. The floor had a slight spring. Beneath it wasn't earth, but stone arches, and under those the river's roar. In a strong wind, the whole structure would sway, just a little. People got used to it. At night, the bridge gates closed. The street became a sealed world. Dozens of families were locked above the water, along with dozens of hearths and candles. This was the most expensive and most crowded buzz street in the city. Wealthy merchants lived here, ambitious craftsmen, their apprentices, and families. Space cost a fortune, but it gave access to the main thing, the flow of people and money. But the crowding, the darkness, the constant creaking of beams, that was only the beginning. The real nightmare began the moment a resident faced the most basic human need: getting rid of waste. The brutal reality of medieval sanitation. The medieval bridge didn't know sewers. It knew gravity. It was brutally simple. A wooden bucket, a window cracked open, a quick shout of, "Look out!" and the contents flew downward. On the bridges of Paris, waste was dumped straight into the river. Despite laws forbidding it, people believed the current would wash it all away, dissolve it, clean it out. But the river wasn't a bottomless throat. Filth got stuck against the piles, wrapped around the supports, clogged the gaps between the stones. During floods, it all rose back up, as if the bridge was breathing in what it had thrown out. Under the houses, water mills thundered. Giant wheels turned almost flush with the foundations, churning the murky, thick water. Picture this closed loop. From above, slops and blood from the butcher. Below, mill blades grinding the same water. Steps away, a baker kneads dough in a trough. Flour settles on black beams. Children run the planks. Underneath flows what was, just yesterday, the neighbor's dinner. The bread bought at dawn had already passed through that invisible cycle, from table to river and back to the table. The smell wasn't just an episode, it was the air people lived in, the sweet rotten stench of decay mixed with coal smoke, wet silt, sour sweat, horse manure, and the metallic tang of blood. In summer, the stench became thick and sticky, as if you could cut it with a knife. In winter, it didn't vanish, it just froze inside the fog, settling as frost on the railings. Disease spread faster than rumors. Dysentery wiped out whole families. Fever burned through children. Skin ulcers became a common sight. All of this within a few steps on the same wooden strip above the water. And yet, the bridge never emptied. People grimaced, cursed, but stayed. Because in that stench, they also felt something else. The clink of coins, the ring of scales, the rustle of cloth. The stench didn't scare off merchants. Where others smelled rot, they smelled profit. Here, the reek of sewage smelled like money, because the bridge was the city's greatest commercial trap. The most expensive real estate in history. Everyone entering the city, a peasant with a cart, a merchant with bales of wool, a pilgrim in dusty sandals, inevitably stepped onto the bridge. It was the bottleneck through which the entire stream of life had to squeeze. Goods were checked here, sacks weighed, tolls collected. A guard could stop you with a single gesture. A shopkeeper could trap you with a glance. Even if you were in a hurry, you had to slow down. The road narrowed, the crowd thickened, and shop windows literally hung over your face. Avoiding trade was impossible. It grabbed every passerby. In Florence, after the flood of 1333, the bridge was deliberately turned into a commercial artery. Shops lined up wall to wall, like teeth in a jaw. In the 14th century, butchers and tanners ruled here. Loud guilds, reeking of blood and tanning chemicals, but incredibly wealthy. Carcasses were carved up right on the counters. Blood ran through the cracks between the planks, and then into the river. Hides were hung out to dry, and the wind carried that sharp, pungent smell across the entire span. Behind all that filth was profit. Turnover was so high it paid for apprentices, gods, and even loans to neighbors. A spot on the bridge wasn't bought with coins alone. It cost connections, rent, city taxes, gifts to officials, all of it baked into the price of standing in that narrow corridor of traffic. But the human current made the risk worth it. Revenue was almost guaranteed. Everyone walking into or out of the city was a potential customer. No alley, no square gave you that kind of advantage. The bridge worked 7 days a week, from the dawn bell until the gates closed at night. It was an economic machine built into the stone. Prices were set here, deals were struck, news spread. One good day could cover a month of expenses. But ruin struck just as fast. A neighbor's fire, a collapsed floor, a conflict with the guild, and trade stopped. Investments sank as quickly as a chest dropped into the water. Wealth here brought no peace. It only deepened the dependence. Every resident understood their profit rested on the same beams as their neighbor's house. One lie about a support, one saved timber, and along with the merchandise, life itself could go into the river. One weak beam, why every resident was in danger. In Erfurt, in the 14th and 15th centuries, the bridge with its houses lived like a body, with bones, joints, and nerves. Under each span, in the murky water, stood piles covered in slime, shells, and trash. Stone piers took the force of the current, but the wooden supports did the real work. If one began to rot, the load slowly shifted to the ones next to it. Beams would sag, barely noticeable. Hairline cracks would appear in the walls. Overload one house with an extra floor or a storage room, and the stress would travel down the whole line of buildings like along a spine. And so the unwritten law of the support emerged. It wasn't always recorded, but people obeyed it more strictly than city decrees. Residents were required to join foundation inspections, chip in for tar, oak piles, and stonemasons. Once a season, men would climb down rickety ladders to the water's edge, feel the wood with knives, listen to how dully the hammer struck back. A rotten pile couldn't be hidden. Too much depended on it. Unauthorized rebuilding was almost a crime. Add one extra storeroom, and you risked other people's lives. Social control wasn't just total, it was survival instinct. Fire in the hearth was measured not just by warmth, but by fear. Too hot a flame would dry out the neighbor's beams. Too much smoke seeped into other people's rooms. Even a bucket of water, thrown out at the wrong moment, could hit the mill wheel and stop it, which meant robbing a neighbor of their livelihood. Footsteps, hammer blows, rolling barrels, everything vibrated through the shared structure. The bridge felt every move. A special caste formed here, a brotherhood of necessity, people bound not only by trade, but by shared vulnerability. They argued over money, sued over inches of space, split customers, and in the evening, they'd gather and ask, has the North Arch settled any further? A neighbor was simultaneously a rival and a safety net. That forced solidarity saved them in daily life, but it also meant something else. If one mistake proved fatal, if a pile undermined by the current finally gave way, the bridge didn't collapse in pieces. It died all at once. And then that common brotherhood became a common fate. Symphony of Collapse, the last morning of Notre-Dame. In 1499, the Parisian bridge of Notre-Dame collapsed as suddenly as a rotting tree falls. The houses on it seemed unshakable. Thick walls, heavy roofs, shop signs hanging right over the water. But beneath that weight worked the same piles, the same river, the same current that had, for centuries, gnawed away at wood and mortar. The weight of the houses grew faster than the supports were reinforced. Hours before the disaster, a carpenter inspecting the span warned the city authorities. The structure was overloaded. The beams were sagging. They brushed it off. The morning was ordinary. Merchants opened shutters, swept doorsteps, and laid out goods. Somewhere, cloth prices were argued. Elsewhere, meat was chopped. Then, a slight jolt. Then a second. The stonework let out a deep groan, as if someone under the bridge was slowly turning a giant screw. Cracks began racing across the walls. People still didn't understand what was happening when a house tilted inward over the span. Then everything happened almost at once. An entire section of the bridge dropped and plunged downward, dragging with it houses, counters, chests of money, beds, hearths. Screams mixed with the crash of falling beams. Those inside didn't even have time to run. Beneath their feet, instead of a floor, the water opened up. The river took them as indifferently as it had taken slops and blood all those years before. When the dust settled, a void gaped where the span had been. Debris swirled in the current. Planks surfaced, pieces of furniture, bales of cloth. This wasn't just a collapse. It was a symbolic blow. It became brutally clear. The hunger for one more story, for one more shop, was stronger than calculation or caution. The bridge, built to connect shores and people, had become a mass grave in minutes, and yet, even this disaster wasn't the darkest sight medieval bridges had witnessed. Nature and builders' miscalculations were only part of the threat. Sometimes man himself turned the bridge into a stage for terror and a display of power. Horror on the Facade, living with public executions. In the 14th century, the entrance to London Bridge wasn't just a way into the city, it was a scene of intimidation. On the towers and above the gates, they displayed the heads of executed traitors. Impaled on pikes, coated in tar, left to the wind, that was the first thing a person saw entering the capital, a reminder of the price of disobedience. You go out for fish, for cloth, for news, and you look up. Above you, blackened faces sway. Merchants argue over prices as if nothing unusual is happening. Life doesn't stop. The smell of decay mixes with fresh bread, hearth smoke, and the dampness of the river. It feeds you, gives you work, brings you wealth, and at the same time reminds you who truly owns this city. But by the end of the 15th century, the very logic of the medieval bridge begins to crack. Cities grow, fires become catastrophes, armies need clear passage, artillery needs line of sight, engineers speak more and more of overload, of risk, of the need to clear the spans. Houses are slowly torn down, shops disappear, beams are removed. The bridge is gradually freed from life. The era when a full street boiled over the river is passing. The cries of merchants fade, the neighbors' curses fade, the creak of floors fades. What remains is naked stone, and the current beneath. Today, a bridge is just a path from point A to point B. But in the Middle Ages, it was a home above the abyss, an economy over water, a community balancing on piles and fear. It was a mirror of the medieval city, of them, with all its greed, its faith, its filth, and its cruelty. Life on the bridge was the medieval version of a modern city center, expensive, cramped, loud, but right at the heart of everything. Do you think we've changed that much? Still willing to overpay for life in concrete high-rises, just for prestige? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more fascinating details of history ahead.